The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Insight Pitch with Skip Lockwood. I'm Ralph Tycho of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and the man is here, number 38, Skip Lockwood. How are you, sir?
Glad to be here.
Okay, tell me then how you got your number 38.
I didn't pick it. The clubhouse guy with the Mets picked it. It was hanging in my locker when I went to get dressed. So there was nothing magic about it. When I came to the Red Sox, I did not ask for it, but it was given to me anyway. So it was a number that followed me. I would have been happy with any number, to be honest with you. When I was with the Brewers, Milwaukee Brewers, I was number 42, which is Jackie Robinson's number.
Oh, yes.
And when I was with the Angels, I was 41. So I really had
Is
no
it true with the Red Sox they don't issue the number 42 to anybody? Never have? I don't know that to be true. I think it probably is. I don't know that that's okay. And that's another question I wanted to ask you. Did you, as a Red Sox alum, ever get to meet Pumpsie Green?
No, I didn't. I wish I had. I know Tommy Harper, which is one of the first ball players who was black, ball player of color. I never met Pumpsie. I heard he was a wonderful guy. I heard he was just a great teammate. I wish I had met him.
He's out here where I live in the Bay Area, North Bay Area, northern part of California. And when I started doing podcasting, I started the network, I reached out to him. And he wasn't able to take calls. I spoke with his wife, and she was very gracious. And there were a lot of things I would have liked to have asked him about the Yorkies, about those days, but never got the chance. And I wondered if you had, and apparently not.
No, I've never met him. There's a ball player right there that saw change. Change was coming, and it was coming slowly in Boston, but coming. And I think it would be so interesting to get his take on what he saw and what it was like to play in Boston. I think they did a special on him in one of the Boston papers, might have been the Globe, in the Sunday supplement section. A couple of weeks ago, and I read
on Pumpsie Green, really?
Yeah, on Pumpsie Green, yeah.
Cool, cool. Because he was also a Met. I don't know if you know, for a short period of time.
I didn't know that.
Okay, well, he was, and obviously.
So you've never spoken to him? You never got
I never spoke to him. I spoke to his very, very gracious wife, and I think for a moment there she was almost going to put me on with him, but never did. He was never up to it, and I haven't spoken to him. It's one of the things I regret doing this. You can't get them all.
Well, you've got me.
We've
got each other.
Let me tell you, this is pretty darn cool. As a Met fan, you mentioned the equipment manager. I even know his last name was Norman.
Herbie Norman, yeah.
Yeah,
Herbie Norman.
I remembered that, and I guess they just gave out numbers randomly as one was acquired, this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah. I don't know whether there was many if any numbers retired at that point in time. The Yankees, of course, had the monuments in center field and those kinds of things. I don't remember that they had retired numbers. Maybe they did. Maybe I was just too focused on what I was doing. But like I know,
you get to walk around the state. I guess you did.
Yeah.
The monuments in Yankee Stadium.
Oh yeah. They were so far in center field that they were not in play. They're 450 feet out there.
Right.
It was kind of cool to walk around and walk in between them.
When I was a kid, at the end of a Yankee game, they would open the gates, and you get to walk on the out. Couldn't walk in the infield. They had guards out there. Sometimes kids would get by the guards and slide into second base, this, that, and the other thing. But you could walk out from the lower seats, the box seats, or what have you. They'd open it up. You'd walk out through center field, and it was. They had a big gate, and they'd open it, and the fans would go out that way. And I've talked about this on these airwaves with David Hubler recently. You're standing out in center field, and you see the expanse of it all. And what a feeling.
Huge.
And
it was huge.
So again, and I reiterate, you talk about you're my guest, you're the guy. You played in the show, and that's, to those of us, vast majority of us, kids who grew up with a baseball glove, with a bat, with a dream. You're like 1% of the 1% type thing. It's a long shot. And you mentioned having Richie Hebner grow up with you where you lived in your town. You both made it to the major leagues. Very incredible.
You know, I look back at it. It was such a blessing. It was so magical to be at Yankee Stadium, and it never got old. I mean, the times when I went to Yankee Stadium, the immensity, the property itself was so big, and the scallop molding around the top of the field, and the train. I could see the train going by in right center. You know, like, I don't know which line it was, the 5 or the 6 or whatever was going by out there. It was just a big place, and you think that, who walked on that ground, Mantle and all those Maris and those guys, DiMaggio and those guys that stepped on that field, it was just, what a privilege.
Now, when you did it, it was before the new Yankee Stadium. You were in the original Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, it was the old ballpark, yeah.
It was, yeah. So we're talking Babe Ruth is the house that the Babe
That's right.
Grew up in. As a kid, did you?
I knew Babe Ruth's roommate. I think I told you this before. Jimmy Reese, who was the coach
with the Angels.
The Angels, yeah. Babe Ruth's roommate, and good friend of Nolan Ryan, and he was quite a guy. He was the Angels coach, I think, in his 80s when he was out there.
Jimmy Reese, if I'm not mistaken, was a Jewish guy. That was not his name. I'm Jewish, so I keep track of the three of us in the world. That Al Rosen, Jimmy Reese, and a lot of Jews playing in the big leagues nowadays. But it was somewhat unusual, and there was so much prejudice. He had a name like Jaime Schwartz or something like that. He had to change his name to play ball. I don't know if you ever discussed any of that.
I never talked that over with him. He was such an unusual guy. He had like a woodworking shop. And when we would go on the road trips, Jimmy didn't come on the road trips with us. He was just too old to go. But he would make frames. he made frames for pictures, and he would give you or somebody that you knew a framed picture of yourself or a framed picture of your family, like for a present or birthday present.
Oh, wow.
He was quite an amazing guy. Yeah, amazing guy.
And literally Babe Ruth's roommate. Did he tell you any stories about Babe, or was it just jokes and smiles?
It was
with
just
his
jokes and
luggage?
smiles. The room with his luggage, the old joke. I never got to sit down with him like that and talk with him. He was always busy and always, he was always in the clubhouse. I remember he and Nolan Ryan were shadows. That everywhere Nolan went, Jimmy was right behind him. It was just it was cute.
Skip, you have a very interesting background in baseball in the sense that you played on teams on both coasts and a Midwestern team as well. And you got a taste of having a home team in cities that are so diverse. If you weren't so in love with Massachusetts, and as you should be, you grew up, this, that, and the other thing, which baseball city would you live in that you played in? If you know what I mean. Which city?
It's a great question. I really love New York, as you know, and we had a home in Greenwich, Connecticut that Tom Seaver talked me into buying. So I would probably have to say New York and living in Connecticut. But I will tell you that we put down roots in Milwaukee for a few years out there in the early 70s, 70 to 74. And that's a beautiful city, clean and fresh. And Milwaukee back then was not, the way it is today. Was not grown up. It was a beautiful place to play. The team came together. We all used to go out after the ball game and get ribs up the street at a restaurant up the street. I felt close to the town. We lived there in the winter, and it was cold, but I just loved being part. Milwaukee was a very rich town, not rich in terms of money. I think they had money, but it was the culture of Milwaukee being, a port city and a lot of people coming and going from the city. Ethnic backgrounds were very German and Polish, and I just loved the people. Harvey Keene was a coach when I was
one of my
Milwaukee.
boyhood heroes when he was with the Giants in '62.
Yeah.
In '62, he was terrific, and a shortstop with the Tigers. Al Kaline days back in the '50s. The stories he must have told. My God.
Oh boy. And he had a bar on the south side, and we'd go down there occasionally. We lived kind of northwest, so going down after the game was not the easiest thing in the world. But I made it down there a few times. There's Harvey. He's at the bar. He's telling stories.
Wow.
I thought the people in Milwaukee were very approachable and welcoming to a young kid from the East. I talked funny. Still do.
Were there a segment of the folks who were kind of bitter about the Milwaukee Braves, who, incidentally, never had a losing season in Milwaukee, as opposed to the Kansas City A's, who never had a winning season in Kansas City? You were a part of that, too. But did people talk about that? Because those were days, Matthews, Spahn,
Aaron,
all of that.
Clemente, Cepeda. Not Clemente, Cepeda. They did. And it was funny in the Milwaukee Sentinel, the paper out there, if you open to the sports page, you'd have to go three or four pages into it before you found anything about baseball. You know, the front page was usually snowmobiling or fishing. Bowling was usually on the second page. You know, you'd have to go deep into that sports page before you found anything at all about the Brewers.
At first, I didn't. At first, I thought you meant the paper itself. You have to go 3 or 4 pages into it. Into the sports section, that's unusual.
So not the Milwaukee Brewers came. All of a sudden, they had a baseball team again, and it was in the American League, and it was a much better National League city. It was talked about. It was when I first began my career as a pitcher, I came and pitched an exhibition game in Milwaukee against the Braves, and that was quite difficult to do.
Wow!
Came from Portland, Oregon, to come and pitch an exhibition game and did not go back.
You stayed.
I stayed. I pitched a 3-hit, 2-1 victory. I think I pitched the whole game. I'm not sure whether I went most of the game. And Ralph, I hit a home run.
Wow.
So,
that has got to be one of those. You know, there's a site on the internet. It's called Retro Sheet. I don't know if you know about that, but you can go in. You type in the date or type in anything. You could find the box score of that game that you pitched in.
Yep.
Wow.
I had to use a lot of those when I wrote the book because I had to make sure the facts were all right. So every time I would mention a game or a batter or something like that, I had to cross-reference all those things. There's a baseball reliquary. There's several sites that go inning by inning. I don't remember ever finding that game, but I know there's sites that go deep and cover, you know, even the black and white games that we played years and years ago.
Right. Well, and plus what YouTube is doing, you can dig up stuff on YouTube now that absolutely incredible footage. Speaking of which, some kid back then, in the day Ted Williams retired, not a big baseball fan particularly, but he happened to bring his 8mm camera to the game. And he walked around filming, taking color shots, not just color movies of Ted Williams' last game in 1959. So that was recently released in the past few days. That's on the internet. They only have black and white footage available of that, and quite interesting to see because very little color footage in the 50s type thing.
You know, it's amazing to me. I think baseball has a rich history. We both love the game. It's one thing for me to see footage of players playing and, you know, the movies and everything. It's another thing to hear the stories. You know, I hope today's players are not so well off that they forget to tell their stories. They forget to tell people what it's like to play. You know, today's players is different. They're more isolated. They have more money. They travel differently than I ever traveled. You know, we traveled on commercial planes. We didn't travel on charter propeller planes. In Milwaukee, we were flying in and out of the same airport where the Air Force used in Mitchell Field, flying over, you know, the lake, you know, coming from all kinds of directions. It's different today. The players are insulated, I think. not that they're spoiled. I don't mean to say that, and I don't mean that. But I hope the tradition of telling baseball stories is rich enough and full enough that these players remember to continue to do that.
You know, from an outsider looking in, I don't think players today are having as much fun. I mean, it's hard to tell a multimillionaire that you're not having fun. But you guys, because of the way you traveled in those days, because you had to have a roommate, and so nowadays players room alone. I don't think you see the camaraderie, and I don't think they're enjoying it as much as you guys did. That's just an observation.
And that's, I don't know whether it was a trade or whether they acquired Mickey Lolich. And Mickey came to the Mets and became my roommate for the year or two that he was, it might have been half a season with New York. And he was my roommate for the time that he was there. I love Mickey Lolich. He's a great person, great pitcher. But I have a funny story. That was the first or second time we were hitting the roads together. I think might have been Chicago. And in we go, and Mickey loved the soap operas. He'd get a little beer from room service, and he'd turn the soaps on, and he'd just veg out and stare at the television. At least he did that the first trip. So when we got to Chicago, I got the clicker, and he didn't see it, and I got a hold of it, and he didn't know I had it. And so the two of us are settling in to the room, and he's putting his bag, away, and I got my bag on one side, but I've got the clicker, and he doesn't know it. So we sit down, we're both, on the beds, and he's looking now. He's looking around, and I know he's looking for the clicker. And so he walks towards the TV, and I click it on. And he stops, and the TV's on, and he didn't know where that came from. And so he's happy. TV's on, so he starts to back up, and I clicked it off. And he got confused. He didn't know that. So he walked towards the TV again. I clicked it on. So he thought there was some invisible barrier or something that was making the TV go off and on. And this happened for a while. And I changed stations on him 2 or 3 times, and he didn't know it. And he actually found out that I was doing it, and he chased me down the hallway with you bastard, he chased me out of the room.
Just kids playing.
Kids playing, that's all.
That's a great story. Mickey didn't do much with the Mets, but my God, what a Detroit Tiger team in those days he came from, with McClain and K-Line and those guys. That was a terrific team. You pitched against those guys.
Yeah, I did.
Well,
Mickey Lolich loved motorcycles, and he had his motorcycle, Harley Davidson, I think, shipped from Detroit to New York. Now, New York is not the safest place to ride a motorcycle because it's so crowded, but Mickey loved his motorcycle. And it was funny, at Shea Stadium, there's a big open area where the players park. The fence, that separates the other parking from the players parking, and a big double gate used to open and close. There was a gate guard, rent-a-cop was there, and they'd open the gates and let you out. And the people had barricades and stuff, were supposed to stay behind the barricades. They're very polite. You know how New Yorkers are. They're usually very polite.
Very polite.
Everybody waved at me, and some used all 5 fingers, and some didn't, But Mickey used to get on a motorcycle in the player's lot and inch it up to the gates, and then open that gate. And he'd crack it a few times, and he would storm out of the gate, leaving rubber and sand and dust and everything like that. Trying to get out onto I don't know where it'd be, probably the highway that goes right by Shea right there. He was a ticket. He was something.
That's great. Great story.
I think he pitched pretty well with the Mets. I don't remember him pitching poorly. He had a hard sinker and a slider. He was nasty. He was sidearm, side wheeler, hat on crooked. He was coming at you. I remember Mickey as a very, very tough competitor.
Well, he was at the end of his career, and I think I remember a sore arm being a factor.
I remember he used a lot of ice, and some of it went on his arm, and some of it went in the glass. I remember he used a lot of ice.
Nothing wrong with that. Looking back, you got to say it kept him happy.
Kept him happy.
This is a great show. I'm really enjoying your company. We plan to talk about your wife's book a little bit. Would you?
Yeah.
How did that come about? That was way before your endeavors into journalism.
Oh. Yeah, Kathy wrote a book called Major League Bride, and it's a memoir. It takes the reader through our early marriage and all the years that we played in the various towns, and it was from a wife's perspective. And she's an English major from Regis College in Weston, Mass. So she's very good with the language. The book is well written, and she has a lot of stories about places we moved. And so I had the life of leisure. I was a celebrity, and so if I had to go do something, I got traded or something happened to me, it was her that had to pack up the furniture and make the move and drive across country. And it was very different from the wife's perspective.
Did you guys have kids in the early years?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, so that's a hell of a lot of responsibility for her.
Yeah. We had two little girls, and trying to raise, a 5 and a 3-year-old when the husband's not around, ever, was a big challenge. I think the biggest challenge for her was to manage her own identity as to who she was and her position, in the community and the family. She was always a ball player's wife, and she is more than that. And she always wanted to speak up for women's issues and their causes and the things that she was passionate about. And baseball.
I was gonna say it was twofold. It wasn't just that she was fighting the idea for her identity because she was a celebrity's wife, if you will, but she was also fighting for womanhood's identity. You didn't have to be married to a celebrity to have an unequal existence back in those days. Remember, we're the same age, so I go back to equal rights and all that, and women. Stories of women's suffrage. We're talking 1964, 68. These are years that were very hectic for womankind, and in turn mankind, because women not being empowered affected men as much. It wasn't even talked about. It's probably not talked about today, but it isn't just women, it's mankind itself. So she transcended a lot of generations of it wasn't like it is now when she started. Is that
yeah, I think that's very accurate. The one thing that was missing for her was we didn't have friends. I mean, she was uprooted, and we would go to a town like Milwaukee. We didn't know anybody. We knew the players that were on the team, the coaching staff, and that's all. And so we had to go find an apartment. We had to, go find a church to go to. We had to go find a restaurant after the thing was over, after the ball game was over. And so her whole life was one of new challenges and new cities and having to deal with, we had, when I played with California, when we were out there, we didn't buy any bananas because we were afraid that I was going to be traded. We bought wicker furniture because we knew we could sell that on the street if we had to. But, we didn't have any friends out there.
Well, is there a wives sorority on the team, kind of not literally called a sorority, but a group of wives that band together and welcome the new women and socialize?
I don't think so. There certainly wasn't. Let's just take Milwaukee. Bonnie Harper and Tommy Harper came in a trade with Jimmy Lonborg and LaHood and Billy Canigliaro came over to us, and Bonnie was Alaskan, beautiful woman. Tommy Harper's black, so trying to get an apartment in Milwaukee was not the easiest thing. And so Kathy would go with her, trying to help her, find a place to stay, and oftentimes being the front person of two, trying to negotiate, get a place to stay. There was a lot of things going on that Kathy had to overcome, and to her great benefit, she did. The book is a cute book. I recommend it to you. Major League Bride.
Okay, let's recommend that to everybody. I'm sure it can be obtained on Amazon.
It can be.
Okay.
You can.
As can yours, Insight Pitch, Skip Lockwood.
Right. Correct. Mine's
Beautiful.
doing pretty well, Ralph. It's doing okay.
As well it should. Just how you envisioned it. Visualization is part of it. You're having fun promoting it too, aren't you?
Yeah, I did. I was on iHeartRadio this morning, Sirius Radio, the local iHeartRadio, with a commentator, 8 o'clock this morning, and I got a lot of feedback from that people liked the interview. It was a brief interview. I don't think it even lasted 10 minutes, 12 minutes. It was in 2 different sections. He had read the book, and I had some questions from him about it. The book, I think, has gotten some traction, and I'm very proud and pleased that people have picked it up and for the most part, like it.
Beautiful. It's terrific. It's a great book, a great read, an easy read, and for a well-educated man, MIT, Columbia University, you don't come off as being pompous. You come off as telling a story, as telling your story as if you and I are talking. And it's terrific fun as a book. So I highly recommend it.
That might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me.
Oh, okay. Well,
Thank you.
Don't keep track, but I'll put that up in my memory book. I admire you for the way your career at the ending of your baseball career, you didn't skip a beat in keeping your identity and working towards the future, and because so few of you as athletes, so few of you can make the transition a smooth one. As you know, we've talked about players in debt financially, marriages crumbling, this, that, and the other thing. So you ought to be commended.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Skip. I hope you'll come back next week. We'll continue.
Thank you. I will be. I'll be back with you next week.
All right, my friend. Thank you again. If you're listening out there, I implore you again to box up children's books, new and gently used. Children's books, bring them to Head Start, and those kids can use them. They need them. They need to be school ready. They need to develop an imagination. They need to get their noses out of computer devices. And most of all, they need to enjoy the pure joy of using their imagination. And they need it. These are kids that, by definition, need the help. So get them books, get neighborhood stuff together, whatever it takes to bring them down to your local Head Start community. And thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Skip Lockwood.
Take care. Good night.
Good night, everybody.